It is a pleasure to have you with us at the English Story Journal. Grab a coffee, find a quiet spot, and let's get lost in the story.
The next 3 weeks were busy at Green Gables. Anne was getting ready for Queen's with sewing and plans. Matthew made sure Anne hid pretty clothes, and Marilla agreed for once. One evening, Marilla brought Anne pale green material. "Anne, here's something for a nice, light dress for you. I don't suppose you really need it. You've plenty of pretty waists. But I thought maybe you'd like something real dressy to wear if you were asked out anywhere of an evening in town, to a party or anything like that. I hear that Jane and Ruby and Josie have got evening dresses, as they call them, and I don't mean you shall be behind them. I got Mrs. Allen to help me pick it in town last week, and we'll get Emily Gillis to make it for you. Emily has got taste, and her fits aren't to be equaled." "Oh, Marilla, it's just lovely," said Anne. "Thank you so much. I don't believe you ought to be so kind to me. It's making it harder every day for me to go away." Emily made the green dress. One evening, Anne put it on for Matthew and Marilla. She recited a poem in the kitchen. Marilla watched Anne's happy face. She remembered Anne arriving at Green Gables as a scared child. This memory made Marilla's eyes wet. "I declare my recitation has made you cry, Marilla," said Anne gaily, stooping over Marilla's chair to drop a butterfly kiss on that lady's cheek. "Now I call that a positive triumph." "No, I wasn't crying over your piece," said Marilla, who would have scorned to be betrayed into such weakness by any poetry stuff. "I just couldn't help thinking of the little girl you used to be, Anne. And I was wishing you could have stayed a little girl, even with all your queer ways. You've grown up now and you're going away, and you look so tall and stylish and so different altogether in that dress, as if you didn't belong in Avonlea at all, and I just got lonesome thinking it all over." "Marilla!" Anne sat down on Marilla's gingham lap, took Marilla's lined face between her hands, and looked gravely and tenderly into Marilla's eyes. "I'm not a bit changed, not really. I'm only just pruned down and branched out. The real me, back here, is just the same. It won't make a bit of difference where I go or how much I change outwardly. At heart, I shall always be your little Anne, who will love you and Matthew and dear Green Gables more and better every day of her life." Anne put her cheek against Marilla. She patted Matthew's shoulder. Marilla wished she could speak her feelings. She could only hug her girl tightly, wishing she need never let her go. Matthew, with wet eyes, got up and went outside to the gate. "Well, now, I guess she ain't been much spoiled," he muttered, proudly. "I guess my putting in my oar occasional never did much harm after all. She's smart and pretty and loving, too, which is better than all the rest. She's been a blessing to us, and there never was a luckier mistake than what Mrs. Spencer made, if it was luck. I don't believe it was any such thing. It was Providence, because the Almighty saw we needed her, I reckon." The day Anne left for town came. She and Matthew drove in that September morning. Anne had a tearful goodbye with Diana. Marilla's goodbye was practical. After Anne left, Diana went to a picnic. Marilla worked fiercely all day, her heart aching deeply. That night, Marilla went to bed. She knew Anne's room was empty. She buried her face to her pillow and wept for her girl, her sobs surprising her when she grew calm. Anne and the other Avonlea students arrived in town and went to the academy. The first day was exciting, meeting new students and teachers. They were put into classes. Anne chose the second-year work, as Miss Stacy advised. Gilbert Blythe chose the same. This meant a teacher's license in 1 year, but much harder work. The other students chose the easier second-class work. Anne felt lonely in a room with 50 students. She knew no one except the tall, brown-haired boy across the room. Knowing him as she did not help much, yet she was glad they were in the same class. Their old rivalry could continue, and Anne would miss it if it were gone. I wouldn't feel comfortable without it, she thought. Gilbert looks awfully determined. I suppose he's making his mind here and now to win the medal. What a splendid chin he has. I never noticed it before. I do wish Jane and Ruby had gone in for first class too. I suppose I won't feel so much like a cat in a strange garret when I get acquainted, though. I wonder which of the girls here are going to be my friends. It's really an interesting speculation. Of course, I promised Diana that no Queen's girl, no matter how much I liked her, should ever be as dear to me as she is, but I've lots of second-best affections to bestow. I like the look of that girl with the brown eyes and the crimson waist. She looks vivid and red-rosy. There's that pale, fair one gazing out of the window. She has lovely hair and looks as if she knew a thing or two about dreams. I'd like to know them both, know them well enough to walk with my arm about their waists and call them nicknames. But just now, I don't know them and they don't know me, and probably don't want to know me particularly. Oh, it's lonesome. It was even more lonely when Anne was alone in her room that night. She could not stay with the other girls who had family in town. Miss Josephine Barry wanted her, but Beechwood was too far. So Miss Barry found a boarding house, telling Matthew and Marilla it was the best place for Anne. "The lady who keeps it is a reduced gentlewoman," explained Miss Barry. "Her husband was a British officer, and she is very careful what sort of boarders she takes. Anne will not meet with any objectionable persons under her roof. The table is good, and the house is near the academy, in a quiet neighborhood." All this was true, but it did not help Anne's terrible homesickness. She looked sadly at her narrow, dull room. A horrible choke came to her throat. She thought of her white room at Green Gables, with its peaceful green views and Diana's light. Here, outside her window, was only a hard street, wires blocking the sky, strange sounds, and unknown faces. Anne knew she would cry, and fought against it. "I won't cry. It's silly and weak. There's the third tear splashing down by my nose. There are more coming. I must think of something funny to stop them. But there's nothing funny except what is connected with Avonlea, and that only makes things worse. 4, 5. I'm going home next Friday, but that seems 100 years away. Oh, Matthew is nearly home by now, and Marilla is at the gate, looking down the lane for him. 6, 7, 8. Oh, there's no use in counting them. They're coming in a flood presently. I can't cheer up. I don't want to cheer up. It's nicer to be miserable." The flood of tears would have come, but then Josie Pye appeared. Happy to see a familiar face, Anne forgot her old dislike for Josie. Even a Pye from Avonlea was welcome now. "I'm so glad you came up," Anne said sincerely. "You've been crying," remarked Josie, with aggravating pity. "I suppose you're homesick. Some people have so little self-control in that respect. I've no intention of being homesick, I can tell you. Town's too jolly after that poky old Avonlea. I wonder how I ever existed there so long. You shouldn't cry, Anne. It isn't becoming, for your nose and eyes get red, and then you seem all red. I'd a perfectly scrumptious time in the academy today. Our French professor is simply a duck. His mustache would give you kerwallops of the heart. Have you anything eatable around, Anne? I'm literally starving. I guessed likely Marilla'd load you up with cake. That's why I called round. Otherwise, I'd have gone to the park to hear the band play with Frank Stockley. He boards same place as I do, and he's a sport. He noticed you in class today and asked me who the red-headed girl was. I told him you were an orphan that the Cuthberts had adopted, and nobody knew very much about what you'd been before that." Anne wondered if solitude and tears were better than Josie's company. Then Jane and Ruby appeared, each with a queen's ribbon pinned to her coat. Josie, not speaking to Jane, became quiet. "Well," said Jane with a sigh, "I feel as if I'd lived many moons since the morning. I ought to be home studying my Virgil. That horrid old professor gave us 20 lines to start in on tomorrow, but I simply couldn't settle down to study tonight. Anne, methinks I see the traces of tears. If you've been crying, do own up. It will restore my self-respect, for I was shedding tears freely before Ruby came along. I don't mind being a goose so much if somebody else is goosey too. Cake? You'll give me a teeny piece, won't you? Thank you. It has the real Avonlea flavor." Ruby, perceiving the Queen's calendar lying on the table, wanted to know if Anne meant to try for the gold medal. Anne blushed and admitted she was thinking of it. "Oh, that reminds me. Queen's is to get one of the Avery scholarships after all. The word came today. Frank Stockley told me. His uncle is one of the board of governors, you know. It will be announced in the academy tomorrow." An Avery scholarship. Anne's heart beat faster, and her ambitions grew instantly. Before this news, her biggest dream with a teacher's license, and perhaps the medal. Now, Anne saw herself winning the scholarship, studying at Redmond College, and graduating. This scholarship was for English, and Anne felt confident in that subject. A wealthy man had died, leaving money for many scholarships for schools in the maritime provinces. There was doubt if Queen's would get one, but it was settled. The student with the highest mark in English would win the scholarship, $250 a year for 4 years at Redmond College. Anne went to bed that night with tingling cheeks. "I'll win that scholarship if hard work can do it," she resolved. "Wouldn't Matthew be proud if I got to be a B.A.? Oh, it's delightful to have ambitions. I'm so glad I have such a lot, and there never seems to be any end to them. That's the best of it. Just as soon as you attain to one ambition, you see another one glittering higher up still. It does make life so interesting."
Anne's homesickness left, helped by weekend visits. When weather was good, Avonlea students went to Carmody every Friday. Diana and friends met them, walking to Avonlea. Anne loved these Friday walks, with cool air and Avonlea's lights. They were the best. Gilbert Blythe often walked with Ruby Gillis, carrying her bag. Ruby was pretty. She wore long skirts and styled her hair. She had big, bright blue eyes and clear skin. She laughed a lot, was cheerful, and enjoyed life. "But I shouldn't think she was the sort of girl Gilbert would like," whispered Jane to Anne. Anne agreed, but she would not say it, not even for the Avery scholarship. She thought it would be nice to have Gilbert as a friend, to talk and share ideas about books, studies, and ambitions. Gilbert had dreams, she knew. Ruby Gillis did not seem like the right person to talk about them with. Anne had no romantic ideas about Gilbert. Boys were just friends. If they were friends, she wouldn't care who he walked with. She had many girlfriends, but she thought boyfriends could give new ideas. If Gilbert walked home with her, they'd have interesting talks about their dreams. Gilbert was clever and wanted to do his best. Ruby Gillis told Jane Andrews that she didn't understand half the things Gilbert Blythe said. He talked just like Anne Shirley did when she had a thoughtful fit on, and for her part, she didn't think it any fun to be bothering about books and that sort of thing when you didn't have to. Frank Stockley had lots more dash and go, but then he wasn't half as good looking as Gilbert, and she really couldn't decide which she liked best. At the academy, Anne made new friends. Stella Maynard, the rose-red girl, and Priscilla Grant, the dream girl. Priscilla looked quiet but was fun. Stella had bright black eyes and many dreams, like Anne's. After Christmas, Avonlea students stopped going home Fridays and worked hard. All Queen students found their places. Only 3 would win the medal: Gilbert, Anne, and Lewis. The Avery scholarship was harder. 6 could win. A small boy was sure to win the math medal. Ruby Gillis was the prettiest girl at the academy. Stella Maynard was most beautiful in second-year classes. Ethel Marr had the best hairstyles. Jane Andrews was best in home skills. Josie Pye was known as the sharpest-tongued girl. Miss Stacy's old students did well. Anne worked hard. Her competition with Gilbert was strong, but not bitter. Anne no longer wished to win just to beat Gilbert. She wanted to win fairly. Winning would be great, but life would be good. Even with studies, students found time for fun. Anne spent free hours at Beechwood. She ate Sunday dinner and went to church with Miss Barry. Miss Barry said she was old, but her eyes were bright and her words strong. She was never sharp with Anne, who was still her favorite. "That Anne girl improves all the time," she said. "I get tired of other girls. There is such a provoking and eternal sameness about them. Anne has as many shades as a rainbow, and every shade is the prettiest while it lasts. I don't know that she is as amusing as she was when she was a child, but she makes me love her, and I like people who make me love them. It saves me so much trouble in making myself love them." Soon spring came. In Avonlea, mayflowers appeared where snow had been, green-covered woods and valleys. But in Charlottetown, Queen students only thought of exams.
"It doesn't seem possible that the term is nearly over," said Anne. "Why, last fall it seemed so long to look forward to, a whole winter of studies and classes. And here we are with the exams looming up next week. Girls, sometimes I feel as if those exams meant everything, but when I look at the big buds swelling on those chestnut trees and the misty blue air at the end of the streets, they don't seem half so important." Jane, Ruby, and Josie did not agree. Exams were very important to them, more than nature. Anne was sure to pass, so it was easy for her. Their future depended on these exams. They could not think calmly. "I've lost 7 pounds in the last 2 weeks," sighed Jane. "It's no use to say, 'Don't worry.' I will worry. Worrying helps you some. It seems as if you're doing something when you're worrying. It would be dreadful if I failed to get my license after going to Queens all winter and spending so much money." "I don't care," said Josie Pye. "If I don't pass this year, I'm coming back next. My father can afford to send me." And Frank Stockley says that Professor Tremaine said that Gilbert Blythe was sure to get the medal and that Emily Clay would likely win the Avery Scholarship. "That may make me feel badly tomorrow, Josie," laughed Anne, "but just now I honestly feel that as long as I know the violets are coming out all purple down in the hollow below Green Gables and that little ferns are poking their heads up in Lover's Lane, it's not a great deal of difference whether I win the Avery or not. I've done my best, and I begin to understand what is meant by the joy of the strife. Next to trying and winning, the best thing is trying and failing. Girls, don't talk about exams. Look at that arch of pale green sky over those houses and picture to yourself what it must look like over the purpley dark beech woods back of Avonlea." "What are you going to wear for commencement, Jane?" asked Ruby practically. Jane and Josie both answered. Their talk moved to fashion. But Anne, resting her head on her hands by the window, looked at city roofs and the sunset sky. She dreamed of a future full of hope. The future was hers, with many possibilities. Each year was a promise, a rose for her crown. On the morning of final exam results at Queen's, Anne and Jane walked down the street. Jane was smiling and happy, sure she had passed. No big dreams for her. Anne was pale and quiet. In 10 minutes, she would know who won the medal, who the Avery. "Of course you'll win one of them anyhow," said Jane. "I have not hope of the Avery," said Anne. "Everybody says Emily Clay will win it, and I'm not going to march up to that bulletin board and look at it before everybody. I haven't the moral courage. I'm going straight to the girls' dressing room. You must read the announcements and then come and tell me, Jane, and I implore you in the name of our old friendship to do it as quickly as possible. If I have failed, just say so, without trying to break it gently. And whatever you do, don't sympathize with me. Promise me this, Jane." Jane promised.
But as it happened, she did not need to keep that promise. At Queen's, boys carried Gilbert Blythe on their shoulders, shouting, "Hurrah for Blythe, medalist!" Anne felt a sad pain. Gilbert won, she failed. Matthew would be sad, she thought. And then somebody called out, "3 cheers for Miss Shirley, winner of the Avery." "Oh, Anne," gasped Jane, as they fled to the girls' dressing room amid cheers. "Oh, Anne, I'm so proud. Isn't it splendid?" Girls gathered around Anne, laughing, congratulating her. She whispered to Jane, "Oh, won't Matthew and Marilla be pleased? I must write the news home right away." Commencement was next at the academy, in the big hall. Speeches, essays, songs, and awards. Matthew and Marilla watched only Anne, who read the best essay, the Avery winner. "Reckon you're glad we kept her, Marilla," whispered Matthew after Anne finished her essay. "It's not the first time I've been glad," retorted Marilla. "You do like to rub things in, Matthew Cuthbert." Miss Barry, sitting behind them, leaned forward and poked Marilla with her parasol. "Aren't you proud of that Anne girl? I am," she said. That evening, Anne went home to Avonlea with Matthew and Marilla. Apple blossoms were out. The world felt new. Diana was at Green Gables. In her white room, Anne saw a rose on the sill, breathing deeply. "Oh, Diana, it's good to be back. It's good to see the pointed firs against the pink sky, and that white orchard, and the old Snow Queen. Isn't the mint delicious? And that rose tea? It's a song and a hope and a prayer all in one. And it's good to see you again, Diana." "I thought you liked that Stella Maynard better than me," said Diana reproachfully. "Josie Pye told me you did. Josie said you were infatuated with her." Anne laughed and pelted Diana with the faded June lilies of her bouquet. "Stella Maynard is the dearest girl in the world, except one, and you are that one, Diana. I love you more than ever, and I've so many things to tell you. But just now, I feel as if it were joy enough to sit here and look at you. I'm tired, I think, tired of being studious and ambitious. Tomorrow, I'll lie in the orchard grass for 2 hours, thinking of nothing." "You've done splendidly, Anne. I suppose you won't be teaching now that you've won the Avery." "No, I'm going to Redmond in September. Doesn't it seem wonderful? I'll have a brand new stock of ambition laid in by that time, after 3 glorious, golden months of vacation. Jane and Ruby are going to teach. Isn't it splendid to think we all got through, even to Moody Spurgeon and Josie Pye?"
"The Newbridge trustees have offered Jane their school already," said Diana. "Gilbert Blythe is going to teach, too. He has to. His father can't afford to send him to college next year, after all, so he means to earn his own way through. I expect he'll get the school here if Miss Ames decides to leave." Anne felt a strange surprise. She didn't know this. What would she do without his rivalry? College might feel flat without her friend and rival. At breakfast, Anne saw Matthew looked unwell. He was much grayer than a year before. "Marilla," she said when he had gone out, "is Matthew quite well?" "No, he isn't," said Marilla in a troubled tone. "He's had some real bad spells with his heart this spring, and he won't spare himself a mite. I've been real worried about him, but he's some better this while back, and we've got a good hired man, so I'm hoping he'll kind of rest and pick up. Maybe he will now you're home. You always cheer him up." Anne leaned across the table and took Marilla's face in her hands. "You are not looking as well yourself as I'd like to see you, Marilla. You look tired. I'm afraid you've been working too hard. You must take a rest now that I'm home. I'm just going to take this one day off to visit all the dear old spots and hunt up my old dreams, and then it will be your turn to be lazy while I do the work." Marilla smiled affectionately at her girl. "It's not the work, it's my head. I've got a pain so often now, behind my eyes. Dr. Spencer's been fussing with glasses, but they don't do me any good. There is a distinguished oculist coming to the island the last of June, and the doctor says I must see him. I guess I'll have to. I can't read or sew with any comfort now." "Well, Anne, you've done real well at Queen's, I must say. To take first-class license in 1 year and win the Avery Scholarship? Well, well. Speaking of Rachel, reminds me, did you hear anything about the Abbey Bank lately, Anne? I heard it was shaky. Why? That is what Rachel said. She was up here one day last week and said there was some talk about it. Matthew felt real worried. All we have is in that bank, every penny. I wanted Matthew to put it in the savings bank in the first place, but old Mr. Abbey was a great friend of father's, and he'd always banked with him. Matthew said any bank with him at the head of it was good enough for anybody. I think he has only been its nominal head for many years. He's a very old man. His nephews are really at the head of the institution. Well, when Rachel told us that, I wanted Matthew to draw our money right out, and he said he'd think of it, but Mr. Russell told him yesterday that the bank was all right. Anne had a good day outside. She spent hours in the orchard, visited old places, and talked with Mrs. Allen. In the evening, she went with Matthew for the cows through Lover's Lane. The woods were beautiful in sunset. Matthew walked slowly, head down. Anne walked at his pace. "You've been working too hard today, Matthew," she said reproachfully. "Why won't you take things easier?" "Well, now, I can't seem to," said Matthew, as he opened the yard gate to let the cows through. "It's only that I'm getting old, Anne, and keep forgetting it. Well, I've always worked pretty hard, and I'd rather drop in harness." "If I had been the boy you sent for," said Anne wistfully, "I'd be able to help you so much now and spare you in 100 ways. I could find it in my heart to wish I had been, just for that." "Well now, I'd rather have you than a dozen boys, Anne," said Matthew, patting her hand. "Just mind you that, rather than a dozen boys. Well now, I guess it wasn't a boy that took the Avery Scholarship, was it? It was a girl, my girl that I'm proud of." He smiled shyly at her as he went into the yard. That night, Anne remembered his smile, sitting at her open window, thinking of past and future. Outside, the Snow Queen tree was white in the moonlight. Frogs sang. It was the last night before sadness touched her life. Life is never the same after such a cold touch. "Matthew, what is the matter? Matthew, are you sick?" Marilla spoke, worried. Anne came through the hall, holding white flowers. She saw Matthew in the porch doorway, a paper in his hand, his face pale. Anne dropped her flowers and ran to him with Marilla, but they were too late. Matthew fell. "He's fainted," Marilla said quickly. "Anne, run for Martin. Quick, quick. He's at the barn." Martin, the hired man, had just come from the post office. He left at once for the doctor, stopping to tell the Barrys. Mrs. Lynde, who was there, came too. They found Anne and Marilla trying to wake Matthew. Mrs. Lynde gently moved them aside, felt his pulse, and put her ear to his heart. She looked at their worried faces, tears in her eyes. "Oh, Marilla," she said gravely, "I don't think we can do anything for him." "Mrs. Lynde, you can't think Matthew is. Anne could not say the terrible word. She felt sick and very pale. "Child, yes, I'm afraid of it. Look at his face. When you've seen that look as often as I have, you'll know what it means." Anne looked at Matthew's still face and saw the sign of death. The doctor said Matthew died at once, likely without pain, from a sudden shock. The paper Matthew held, brought by Martin, showed the Abbey Bank had failed. News spread quickly. Friends and neighbors came to Green Gables all day, helping and honoring Matthew. Shy Matthew was central for the first time. When night came, Green Gables was quiet. Matthew lay in his coffin in the parlor. His gray hair framed his peaceful face, smiling. Flowers he loved were around him. Anne had gathered them, her tearless eyes burning. It was the last thing she could do. The Barrys and Mrs. Lynde stayed that night. Diana went to Anne at her window and said gently, Dear Anne, would you like to have me sleep with you tonight? Thank you, Diana. I think you won't misunderstand me when I say I want to be alone. I'm not afraid. I haven't been alone 1 minute since it happened, and I want to be. I want to be quite silent and quiet and try to realize it. I can't realize it. Half the time it seems to me that Matthew can't be dead, and the other half it seems as if he must have been dead for a long time, and I've had this horrible, dull ache ever since. Diana did not quite understand. She understood Marilla's loud sadness better than Anne's silent grief, but Diana left kindly, leaving Anne alone with her sorrow. Anne hoped tears would come. She felt terrible not crying for Matthew, whom she loved. Matthew, who walked with her last evening, now lay below. No tears came. She knelt by her window in the dark, prayed, and looked at the stars. Still no tears, just a dull ache. It hurt until she fell asleep. She woke in the night, sadness washing over her. She saw Matthew's smiling face from their last goodbye. She heard his voice, my girl that I'm proud of." Tears came, and Anne cried. Marilla heard her and crept in to comfort her. There, don't cry so, dearie. It can't bring him back. It isn't right to cry so. I knew that today, but I couldn't help it then. He'd always been such a good, kind brother to me, but God knows best."
"Oh, just let me cry, Marilla," sobbed Anne. "The tears don't hurt me like that ache did. Stay here for a little while with me and keep your arm round me. So, I couldn't have Diana stay. She's good and kind and sweet, but it's not her sorrow. She's outside of it, and she couldn't come close enough to my heart to help me. It's our sorrow, yours and mine. Oh, Marilla, what will we do without him?"
"We've got each other, Anne. I don't know what I'd do if you weren't here, if you'd never come. Oh, Anne, I know I've been kind of strict and harsh with you, maybe, but you mustn't think I didn't love you as well as Matthew did for all that. I want to tell you now when I can. It's never been easy for me to say things out of my heart, but at times like this, it's easier. I love you as dear as if you were my own flesh and blood, and you've been my joy and comfort ever since you came to Green Gables." 2 days later, Matthew Cuthbert was carried from Green Gables. Avonlea returned to normal. At Green Gables, life continued, work done, but with a sense of loss. Anne felt sad that life went on without Matthew. She felt ashamed when beauty and Diana's company still brought her joy. Life still called. "It seems like disloyalty to Matthew somehow, to find pleasure in these things now that he is gone," she said softly to Mrs. Allan one evening when they were together in the manse garden. "I miss him so much, all the time. And yet, Mrs. Allan, the world and life seem very beautiful and interesting to me for all. Today, Diana said something funny and I found myself laughing. I thought when it happened I could never laugh again, and it somehow seems as if I oughtn't to. When Matthew was here, he liked to hear you laugh, and he liked to know that you found pleasure in the pleasant things around you," said Mrs. Allan gently. "He is just away now, and he likes to know it just the same. I am sure we should not shut our hearts against the healing influences that nature offers us, but I can understand your feeling. I think we all experience the same thing. We resent the thought that anything can please us when someone we love is no longer here to share the pleasure with us, and we almost feel as if we were unfaithful to our sorrow when we find our interest in life returning to us. I was down to the graveyard to plant a rose bush on Matthew's grave this afternoon. I took a piece of the Scotch rose bush his mother brought from Scotland. Matthew liked those roses best. It made me feel glad that I could plant it by his grave, as if I were doing something that would please him. I hope he has roses like them in heaven. Perhaps the souls of the roses he loved were there to meet him. I must go home now. Marilla is alone and gets lonely at twilight. She will be lonelier still, I fear, when you go away again to college, said Mrs. Allen. Anne said good night and went back to Green Gables. Marilla sat on the front steps, and Anne sat beside her. The door was open. Anne picked honeysuckle flowers and put them in her hair. She liked the sweet smell.
Dr. Spencer was here while you were away, Marilla said. He says that the eye doctor will be in town tomorrow, and he insists that I must go in and have my eyes examined. I suppose I'd better go and have it over. I'll be more than thankful if the man can give me the right kind of glasses to suit my eyes. You won't mind staying here alone while I'm away, will you? Martin will have to drive me in, and there's ironing and baking to do. I shall be all right. Diana will come over for company for me. I shall attend to the ironing and baking beautifully. You needn't fear that I'll starch the handkerchiefs or flavor the cake with liniment. Marilla laughed. What a girl you were for making mistakes in them days, Anne. You were always getting into scrapes. I did used to think you were possessed. Do you mind the time you dyed your hair? Yes, indeed. I shall never forget it, smiled Anne, touching the long braid of hair that was wrapped around her head. I laugh a little now sometimes when I think what a worry my hair used to be to me, but I don't laugh much because it was a very real trouble then. I did suffer terribly over my hair and my freckles. My freckles are really gone, and people tell me my hair is auburn now, all but Josie Pye. She told me yesterday that she thought it was redder than ever, or at least my black dress made it look redder, and she asked if red-haired people ever got used to it. Marilla, I've almost decided to give up trying to like Josie Pye. I've tried hard to like her, but Josie Pye won't be liked. Josie is a pie, said Marilla sharply, so she can't help being disagreeable. I suppose people of that kind serve some useful purpose in society, but I must say I don't know what it is any more than I know the use of thistles. Is Josie going to teach? No, she is going back to Queen's next year. So are Moody Spurgeon and Charlie Sloane. Jane and Ruby are going to teach, and they have both got schools. Jane at Newbridge and Ruby at some place up west. Gilbert Blythe is going to teach too, isn't he? Yes, briefly. What a nice-looking fellow he is, said Marilla without thinking. I saw him in church last Sunday, and he seemed so tall and manly. He looks a lot like his father did at the same age. John Blythe was a nice boy. We used to be real good friends, he and I. People called him my beau. Anne looked up with quick interest. Oh, Marilla, and what happened? Why didn't you— We had a quarrel. I wouldn't forgive him when he asked me to. I meant to after a while, but I was sulky and angry, and I wanted to punish him first. He never came back. The Blythes were very independent, but I always felt rather sorry. I've always wished I'd forgiven him when I had the chance. So you've had a bit of romance in your life too, said Anne softly. Yes, I suppose you might call it that. You wouldn't think so to look at me, but you never can tell about people from their outsides. Everyone forgot about me and John. I'd forgotten myself, but it all came back to me when I saw Gilbert last Sunday. Marilla went to town the next day and returned in the evening. Anne had gone to Orchard Slope with Diana and came back to find Marilla in the kitchen, sitting by the table with her head leaning on her hand. Anne felt a chill in her heart. Are you very tired, Marilla? Yes. No, I don't know, said Marilla wearily, looking up. I suppose I am tired, but I haven't thought about it. It's not that. Did you see the eye doctor? What did he say? Asked Anne anxiously. Yes, I saw him. He examined my eyes. He says that if I give up all reading and sewing entirely, and any kind of work that strains the eyes, and if I'm careful not to cry, and if I wear the glasses he's given me, he thinks my eyes may not get any worse, and my headaches will be cured.
But if I don't, he says I'll certainly be stone blind in 6 months. Blind, Anne. Just think of it." For a minute, Anne was silent. She felt she could not speak. Then she said bravely, but with a little break in her voice, "Marilla, don't think of it. He has given you hope. If you're careful, you won't lose your sight, and if his glasses cure your headaches, it will be great." "I don't call it much hope," said Marilla bitterly. "What am I to live for if I can't read or sew? I might as well be blind or dead, and I can't help crying when I get lonesome. But it's no good talking about it. If you'll get me a cup of tea, I'll be thankful. I'm done out. Don't say anything about this to anyone yet. I can't bear that folks should come here to question and sympathize and talk about it." When Marilla had eaten, Anne persuaded her to go to bed. Then Anne went to her room and sat in the dark crying. Things had changed since she came home. Before, she had been full of hope, but before she slept, she smiled, finding peace in her new duty. One afternoon, Marilla came in from the front yard. She looked sad. "What did Mr. Sadler want, Marilla?" Marilla sat down by the window and looked at Anne. Her tears were in her eyes, and her voice broke as she said, "He heard that I was going to sell Green Gables, and he wants to buy it." "Buy it? Buy Green Gables?" Anne wondered if she had heard right. "Oh, Marilla, you don't mean to sell Green Gables?" "Anne, I don't know what else is to be done. I've thought it all over. If my eyes were strong, I could stay here and manage with a hired man, but I can't. I may lose my sight altogether, and anyway, I'll not be fit to run things. Oh, I never thought I'd have to sell my home. Things would only get worse, till nobody would want to buy it. All our money went in that bank, and Matthew left some notes to pay. Mrs. Lynde advises me to sell the farm and board somewhere, with her, I suppose. It won't bring much, it's small and old, but it'll be enough for me to live on, I reckon. I'm thankful you're provided for with that scholarship, Anne. I'm sorry you won't have a home to come to in your vacations, that's all, but I suppose you'll manage somehow." Marilla broke down and wept bitterly. "You mustn't sell Green Gables," said Anne resolutely. "Oh, Anne, I wish I didn't have to, but you can see for yourself. I can't stay here alone. I'd go crazy with trouble and loneliness, and my sight would go. I know it would." "You won't have to stay here alone, Marilla. I'll be with you. I'm not going to Redmond." "Not going to Redmond?" Marilla lifted her tired face from her hands and looked at Anne. "Why, what do you mean?" "Just what I say. I'm not going to take the scholarship. I decided so the night you came home from town. You don't think I could leave you alone in your trouble, Marilla, after all you've done for me. I've been thinking and planning. Let me tell you my plans. Mr. Barry wants to rent the farm for next year, so you won't have any bother over that. And I'm going to teach. I've applied for the school here, but I don't expect to get it. The trustees promised it to Gilbert Blythe, but I can have the Carmody School, Mr. Blair told me last night. It won't be as nice as the Avonlea School, but I can live at home and drive to Carmody. We'll keep a horse for that. Oh, I have it all planned out, Marilla, and I'll read to you and keep you cheered up. You won't be dull or lonesome. We'll be cozy and happy here, you and I." Marilla had listened like a woman in a dream. "Oh, Anne, I could get on real well if you were here, I know, but I can't let you sacrifice yourself so for me. It would be terrible." "Nonsense," Anne laughed merrily. "There is no sacrifice. Nothing could be worse than giving up Green Gables. Nothing could hurt me more. We must keep the dear old place. My mind is quite made up, Marilla. I'm not going to Redmond, and I am going to stay here and teach. Don't you worry about me a bit." "But your ambitions and—" "I'm as ambitious as ever. I've just changed what I want. I'm going to be a good teacher, and I'm going to save your eyesight. Also, I'll study at home and take a small college course.
Oh, I have many plans, Marilla. I've been thinking about them for a week. I will give my best to life here, and I believe it will give its best back. When I left Queens, my future seemed like a straight road. I thought I could see far. Now there is a bend in it. I don't know what is around the bend, but I will believe that the best is there. That bend has a special charm, Marilla. I wonder how the road goes after it. What new beauties are further on? I don't feel as if I ought to let you give it up, said Marilla, talking about the scholarship. But you can't prevent me. I'm 16 and a half, stubborn as a mule, as Mrs. Lynde once told me, laughed Anne. Oh, Marilla, don't you go pitying me. I don't like to be pitied, and there is no need for it. I'm heart-glad over the very thought of staying at dear Green Gables. Nobody could love it as you and I do, so we must keep it. You blessed girl, said Marilla, giving in. I feel as if you'd given me new life. I guess I ought to stick out and make you go to college, but I know I can't, so I'm not going to try. I'll make it up to you, though, Anne. People in Avonlea heard Anne Shirley had given up college to teach. Most thought she was foolish. Mrs. Allen and Mrs. Lynde agreed. Mrs. Lynde came one evening and found Anne and Marilla sitting at the front door. She sat down, tired but relieved. I've declared I'm getting glad to sit down. I've been on my feet all day. Well, Anne, I hear you've given up your notion of going to college. I was real glad to hear it. You've got as much education now as a woman can be comfortable with. I don't believe in girls going to college with the men and cramming their heads full of Latin and Greek and all that nonsense. But I'm going to study Latin and Greek just the same, Mrs. Lynde. I'm going to take my arts course right here at Green Gables and study everything that I would at college. Mrs. Lynde lifted her hands in great surprise. Anne Shirley, you'll kill yourself. Not a bit of it. I shall thrive on it. Oh, I'm not going to overdo things. I shall be medium, but I'll have lots of spare time in the long winter evenings, and I've no interest in fancy work. I'm going to teach over at Carmody, you know. I don't know it. I guess you're going to teach right here in Avonlea. The trustees have decided to give you the school. Mrs. Lynde, cried Anne, jumping to her feet in her surprise. Why, I thought they had promised it to Gilbert Blythe. So they did, but as soon as Gilbert heard you applied for it, he went to them, they had a meeting last night, and withdrew his application, suggesting they accept yours. He said he was going to teach at White Sands. He knew how much you wanted to stay with Marilla, and I think it was very kind and thoughtful of him. Self-sacrificing, too, for he'll pay for board at White Sands, and he needs to earn his way through college. So the trustees decided to take you. I was tickled to death when Thomas came home and told me. I don't feel that I ought to take it. I mean, I don't think I ought to let Gilbert make such a sacrifice for me. I guess you can't prevent him now. He's signed papers with the White Sands trustees, so it wouldn't do him any good now if you were to refuse. Of course you'll take the school. Bless my heart, what does all that winking and blinking at the Barry Gable mean? Diana is signaling for me to go over, laughed Anne. You know, we keep up the old custom. Excuse me while I run over and see what she wants. Anne ran down the hill and disappeared into the trees. Mrs. Lynde watched her kindly. There's a good deal of the child about her yet in some ways. There's a good deal more of the woman about her in others, replied Marilla. Mrs. Lynde later told her Thomas, Marilla Cuthbert has got mellow, that's what. Anne went to Matthew's grave the next evening with fresh flowers. She stayed until dusk. As she walked home, Avonlea looked peaceful. Lights twinkled, the sea was misty, and the soft sky reflected in the pond. Anne's heart felt happy. Dear old world, you are very lovely, and I am glad to be alive in you. Halfway down the hill, a tall boy came whistling out of a gate at the Blythe home. It was Gilbert. His whistle stopped when he saw Anne. He took off his cap politely. He would have walked past in silence, but Anne stopped and held out her hand. Gilbert, she said, with red cheeks, I want to thank you for giving up the school for me. It was very good of you, and I want you to know that I appreciate it." Gilbert took the offered hand eagerly. "It wasn't particularly good of me at all, Anne. I was pleased to be able to do you some small service. Are we going to be friends after this? Have you really forgiven me my old fault?" laughed Anne, and tried unsuccessfully to pull back her hand. "I forgave you that day by the pond landing, although I didn't know it. What a stubborn little goose I was. I may as well make a complete confession, I've been sorry ever since." "We are going to be the best of friends," said Gilbert happily. "We were born to be good friends, Anne. You've stopped fate enough. I know we can help each other in many ways. You're going to keep up your studies, aren't you? So am I. Come, I'm going to walk home with you." Marilla looked at Anne with curiosity when Anne came into the kitchen.
"Who was that came up the lane with you, Anne?" answered Anne, upset to find herself blushing. "I met him on Barry's Hill." "I didn't think you and Gilbert Blythe were such good friends that you'd stand for half an hour at the gate talking to him," said Marilla with a dry smile. "We haven't been, we've been good enemies, but we have decided that it will be much more sensible to be good friends in the future." "Were we really there half an hour? It seemed just a few minutes. But you see, we have 5 years lost conversations to catch up with, Marilla." Anne sat by her window that night, feeling happy. The wind blew softly. Her future plans had changed, but she knew quiet happiness would still come. She would have joy from work and friendship. Nothing could take away her dreams. And there was always the bend in the road. "God's in his heaven, all's right with the world," whispered Anne softly.
Thank you for spending time with us. I hope this story brought you peace and reflection. We will see you soon.